Welcome to the Great Basin Seasonal Outlook for July through October. Over the last 1 to 2 weeks, we've seen very dry conditions over the southern two-thirds of the Great Basin. The only area that saw near or just above normal precipitation was over parts of central Idaho. Temperatures have also been very warm across the entire west and across the Great Basin have been anywhere from 3 to 10 degrees above normal, and these are mean temperatures. The percent of average precipitation for the last 30 days has also been well below normal in most areas. The only exception is the far southern areas of the Great Basin that did see this precipitation in just the first few days of June. So since then, it's been very dry even over southern areas as well. The percent of average precipitation for the water year dating back to October 1st, you can see is below normal across most of the Great Basin. The only areas near or just above normal would be parts of western Idaho into far northwest Nevada. Looking at the drought monitor and outlook, you can see we still have significant drought over the southern half of the Great Basin where we have extreme to severe drought in many areas. We are seeing that severe drought extend further north into Utah, and we are even seeing moderate to severe drought over parts of central and eastern Idaho into western Wyoming. Otherwise, abnormally dry conditions, this yellow area, have developed over the rest of the Great Basin, so not quite into that D1 category of drought, but definitely have been seeing those warmer and drier conditions take effect on the landscape. Looking at the drought outlook on the right, we are expecting the drought to persist or intensify over the southern two-thirds of the Great Basin and most likely develop a little bit further up into parts of central and eastern Idaho, Wyoming, and even northern Utah. We still are not expecting any drought to develop over parts of western and northern Nevada into southwest Idaho, but again, these will have implications for the fire season going forward. Looking at the last 2 weeks, just with the very warm and dry conditions, you can see this is the evaporative demand drought index, which is a little bit more indicative of the shorter term flash drought scenario. And you can see how much drier we have seen those conditions over southern Nevada, southern Utah, into Arizona, and really even up into northern Utah and the Uinta Basin. So again, in this area of where we're seeing the significant changes in dryness is where we have seen large fires over the last couple of weeks. So looking at our fuel conditions, in addition to the drying we've seen, we also have issues with fine fuels this year. Over the last 2 years, we've seen good fine fuel growth over the northern part of Nevada into southern and southwest Idaho. And you can see this is from Matt Reeves, the 7-layer cake. So again, it's just showing areas in kind of the brighter yellows, oranges, showing increased likelihood of large fires. And you can see those areas again are over northern Nevada, southern Idaho. Also, to a lesser degree in parts of western Nevada, we do have pockets of that heavier fuel load. And even in parts of the western foothills up over in central Utah, we are seeing some pockets of above normal fine fuel loading as well. So all of these areas will have issues in the lower to mid elevations because of the fine fuels. The areas that are grayed out are areas that have less than 600 pounds per acre of fine fuel loading, so generally on the lower side of fine fuel loading. And then obviously this does not take into account our mountainous areas, which have other concerns with dry conditions and very low fuel moistures. But again, it'll be these grass areas that we'll be watching as we go throughout the fire season as well. So looking at some of our current fuel conditions, 10-hour fuel moisture, more indicative of our grasses, showing very dry conditions really over the southern half of the Great Basin, and we are seeing that drying further north. And then our 100-hour fuel moisture, which really correlates to large fires across the Great Basin, we're seeing areas less than 5% or really close to that over the southern areas of the Great Basin. And also we are seeing the 100-hour fuel moisture in the 6 to 10% range extend as far north as parts of southern and even central Idaho and southwest Wyoming. So very dry conditions across the region. We're seeing the similar trend in the 1,000-hour fuel moistures, definitely some low readings in our 1,000 hours as well. Looking at the Great Basin ERC percentile point map, this shows these dry conditions very well, where much of the southern half or eastern two-thirds of the Great Basin is above the 90th to 97th percentile with respect to ERC, even up into eastern Idaho and Wyoming, and then scattered about western Nevada and even some points now in the Salmon Chalice. Areas over the rest of western and northern Nevada into southwest and western Idaho are generally below the 70th percentile. However, these are areas that we do have significant fine fuel loading, so even with the lower ERCs, we are still seeing fires to ignite and grow to several hundred or thousands of acres because of these fine fuel conditions, as well as some of our 100-hour live and dead fuel moistures that are also very low. So looking at some of our conditions, this is 100-hour fuel moisture. So for northern parts of the Great Basin, we are seeing those 100-hour fuel moistures well below normal, not quite near record lows, but you can see by the blue line as the current conditions, definitely well below normal and kind of below the 10% threshold. We will see some of these fuel moistures increase going into early July as we do see some moisture with thunderstorms. However, because of how dry the fuels are, these thunderstorms will become more problematic than helpful initially. Looking at 100-hour fuel moisture further south, so parts of western Nevada and southwest Utah that we have had larger fires and team fires this year so far, 100-hour fuel moistures have been at record lows or setting new record lows for the time of year. We will see some increases in some of these areas as well, with, again, that return of moisture and thunderstorms, but again, expecting the lightning to be more problematic before the moisture is truly helpful. So now that we've looked at some of our past conditions, we'll look at what we're expecting going forward. Through the first week in July, we are expecting that first pulse of somewhat monsoon moisture moving up into parts of Utah. We also have an area of low pressure off the west coast, so we are getting some thunderstorms and moisture to move in from the Pacific as well, so kind of getting hit by two different systems going through the first week in July. All will have a similar effect to increase thunderstorm activity. Some of these thunderstorms will be a mix of wet and dry. We may see some moisture up in central Idaho and may see some rainfall in parts of the higher terrain of Utah. But for the most part of these thunderstorms being a mix of wet and dry, with how dry the conditions have been, will still increase initial attack at a minimum going through the first part of July, if not increase the likelihood of large fires. Now looking at the 8 to 14-day outlook, still expecting above normal temperatures for much of the Great Basin, and the only area of really above normal precipitation will be at times coming up from the southwest with the monsoon moisture. But right now it's looking like we'll see more brief pulses of monsoon moisture move up into the eastern half of the Great Basin, increasing thunderstorms, giving some brief moisture to the region, but then we'll see periods of drier weather as well. So we aren't expecting this moisture to really be prolonged for at least extended periods of time. Again, it'll be more a very pulse-like through at least the first half of July. So again, we are expecting an increase in fire potential because of that lightning. Otherwise, generally near normal precipitation further north. And then looking for the month of August, this is July through September, the 3-month outlook. You can see still those warm temperatures camped out across the west, and really equal chances of below and above normal precipitation. This is from the Climate Prediction Center. But right now it's still looking like any moisture will be tied to really the Four Corners area, the eastern half of the Great Basin as we get later into the summer, and still generally drier conditions across Idaho in the north, which certainly will be an issue going into the August-September time period. So putting everything together, we do have quite a bit of above normal fire potential expected. Currently, we have fuel and fire behavior advisories in effect for parts of southern Utah for some of those fuel conditions. So we are expecting these above normal fire potential to continue at least through the first half of July over parts of southern and eastern Nevada in the higher elevations and across southern and central Utah in the higher elevations as well. Not much of a grass component in many of these areas, but it's really the live and dead fuel moisture and how dry conditions have been with the drought that is most significant in, again, those mid and higher elevations. As we get later in July, we may start to see some of these areas where the moisture takes a little bit more hold and starts to decrease fire potential, but at least for the first half of the month, if not a little bit longer, we are expecting those above normal conditions. Further north, we are expecting above normal fire potential anywhere from the Sierra Front in western Nevada across northern Nevada, southern and central Idaho, and into western Wyoming to continue. And this will continue throughout August and September. And again, we do have kind of a combination of issues. One is the fine fuel loading that we've already discussed in many of these areas, but also into parts of central Idaho and western Wyoming. Obviously, that's more high elevation, and that will be more an issue with our very dry fuels, the developing drought conditions, and the overall warm and dry overall pattern we are expecting throughout the fire season. So I do expect northern areas in the mountains to get much more active, especially as we get into August and likely continuing into September for a period of time. By October, we are expecting conditions to return to normal, which would be decreasing fire activity. So we'll continue to watch how this pattern evolves. That concludes our seasonal outlook for this month. Check back next month for the latest updates.